For me, there are two cities in the world that fall off the bottom of continents. There's Cape Town and there's Melbourne. Both of them try and have as little as possible to do with the continent they're on. There are lessons to learn from it because it's trying to become a seat of radical thinking, but it's also a place which has difficulty establishing its own identity.
After the World Cup, Cape Town didn't know what it was and what it wanted to be. And there was a space which just questioned what we could do without fixed deadlines and what was the 2020 vision for the city. We come from a legacy of aggressive apartheid planning, which was aggressive separation policies.
So achieving integration, I think, is the great urban challenge of our time.
We've promised a certain type of lifestyle in post-apartheid South Africa. We've promised essentially suburbia.
Society has told them, the people for whom the social housing is being built, that's a sense of wealth and accomplishment, and that is something to strive to. Now you want to put me on the 5th floor of something, and it seems as if you're giving me less and not more. Because of the history of South Africa and apartheid and people being looked down on, it's an argument that a lot of people coming into communities to make a difference don't feel they can argue with, and so they feel they have to give what's being asked of them, which is the one house, one plot. It's actually not feasible.
And so architecture and urban design must really get stuck into what will be sustainable going forward and how we can start communicating that shift from promising a certain lifestyle to change the legacy, start building a new vision of Cape Town to something that the city and citizens will actually benefit from.
You need to be radical thinking about your public transport system. You're introducing buses now. Maybe you need monorails. Maybe you need to be so radical that you reduce the number of cars. I mean, America at the moment, they're pulling down motorways and they're taking 6-lane highways and making them 2-lane highways with bikeways. In other words, it's returning the city to being walkable so that people within 400 meters can actually lead a whole life. And you can have all the diversity that you want, and we've got to transcend to that point. So maybe we can build in a different way here.
We know the model that we have to be seeking. It is a walking world. It has dignified public spaces. It is dense enough for people to create opportunities. The present form that we have, which is dominated by sprawl, could not be worse. It massively increases poverty because household budgets are dominated by transportation. It is the worst possible form in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It wastes people's time, it wastes energy, and you simply can't run a city like that.
Yeah, look, only 4% of the buildings of the world are designed, all the rest are done by the people. So it's a bit arrogant to think you can't learn from the people.
But it's also a fallacy that informal settlements are only about bottom-up development. You get a kind of spatial complexity that you can't possibly design. But when it gets to a bigger scale, bigger collective places, the self-interest becomes too strong relative to the collective. That's where you need top-down actions.
You go to Peru and you have a look what 15 great architects in the world did with the Previ scheme, having a go at designing model houses for the urban poor. And then 25 years afterwards, you go there and that single-story house is 5 stories with staircases all around, with rentable space that's permutated to become a whole another thing. Good architects have learnt from that and gone and done new housing which gives defensible space and anticipates that someone living in a house is going to actually build something on top which they're going to rent. In South Africa, we still have the mindset at the moment that if you design to a high density for Africans, you're going to create a slum. Whereas if you actually create urban environments for the masses, everything becomes more economic.
Society is not going to create employment for people at anything like the scale necessary, and that is profoundly affected by urban structure and form.
People can build incrementally, even on top of one another, provided there's a concrete framework and floors so that they can actually earn a living. So we can learn from one another. We've got to go out of our English-speaking mindset to learn, and then extrapolating the principles from that and applying them. But there are very few government structures that have empathy for allowing you to do that. They sort of give it to engineers. And when the developers get hold of it, it just becomes the most banal environment. It just becomes a numbers game, which has nothing to do with social issues. And then it all backfires. The old notion of the core and the periphery and the 60s notion of cities don't hold anymore. They're just far more diverse than that.
And we have to begin to look at much more compact cities. We have no option. It means beginning to promote an urban model which is not high-rise, because you can get very adequate densities, never going higher than walk-ups, 4 stories.
We all talk about multiplicity of use and also cities that live, so you can have a high component of residential in the city.
That's the model I think we need to be pursuing. We don't have an urban tradition, and I think we face the challenge in this generation of really beginning to take urban seriously.
And you need to sort of be leaders in a way, because there are no real precedents. There's only one Cape Town. And maybe Cape Town is such an anomaly that it needs to take a more radical stand as to how it develops.
It's going to be uncomfortable because it's not going to be the Cape Town we always know.
You can't do it and be conservative at the same time. Otherwise, we'll land up with a tepid result. You need people who are brave, willing to go against the grain.
We know what we have to do. It's just nobody quite believes it.